The massive starship hung in space like a sleeping giant, its dark metal hull reflecting the swirling colors of the Kepler nebula around it. Captain Hyun pressed his face against the observation deck window of the research vessel Harmony, watching, in amazement, as tiny scratches on the alien ship's surface slowly filled themselves in and disappeared. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "Metal doesn't heal itself." Lieutenant Nari looked up from her scanning station, her 6 arms moving rapidly across the control panels. As a Zentorian, she could process data faster than most species in the galaxy, but even she seemed confused by what she was seeing. "Captain, the energy readings are off the charts," she said, her voice filled with excitement and worry. "This ship is generating power levels that should have torn it apart years ago, but somehow it's completely stable. Behind them, communications." Officer June was frantically adjusting his equipment, trying to make sense of the signals coming from the mysterious vessel. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked. "Sir, it's still broadcasting that same message every 6 hours, June reported. "The translation computers keep spitting out the same result, waiting for the chosen pilot. But there are other words in there that make no sense. Something about a species called humans, and something called bonding protocol." Captain Hyun walked over to the tactical display, where holographic images showed the attempts made by other coalition ships over the past 3 months. The Krillian warfleet had tried to cut through the hull with plasma torches, but the metal had simply absorbed the energy and grown brighter. The peaceful Aquarian diplomats had sent their best telepaths to communicate with whatever intelligence might be inside, but they had found only silence. Even the mechanical synthetics had failed to interface with the ship's systems electronically. 12 different species, dozens of different approaches, and nothing, Hyun muttered. "The ship just sits there waiting." Dr. Tay, the Coalition's most respected xenoarchaeologist, entered the observation deck, carrying a thick datapad filled with ancient texts and star charts. His usually calm expression showed signs of deep concern. "Captain, I've been researching these humans mentioned in the ship's broadcast," Dr. Tay said, setting his datapad on the central table. "They're not completely unknown to us, but the information is scattered and mostly considered legend." The holographic display shifted to show ancient cave paintings from a dozen different worlds, all depicting tall, bipedal creatures with 5-fingered hands and expressive faces. Some showed them building great cities, others showed them among the stars. "These beings appear in the folklore of many species," Dr. Tay continued, "always described as adaptable, emotional, and surprisingly resourceful. Most accounts suggest they disappeared around 300 years ago, when their homeworld was destroyed in some kind of catastrophe." Lieutenant Nari's antennae twitched with curiosity. "But sir, if they're extinct, why would this ship be waiting for one of them?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the Harmony. The mysterious ship was doing something new. "Captain, the derelict is powering up," June shouted from his station. "Energy levels are spiking across all spectrums." Through the observation window, they watched as the alien vessel began to glow with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The light traveled along geometric patterns carved into the hull, patterns that none of them had noticed before. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "All ships, move to safe distance," Captain Hyun commanded into his communicator. "We don't know what it's about to do." The Coalition fleet, consisting of vessels from 8 different species, quickly backed away from the mysterious ship. But instead of exploding or attacking, the vessel simply continued its gentle pulsing for exactly 1 minute, then went dark again. "What was that about?" Nari wondered aloud. Dr. Tay was studying his readings with growing excitement. "The ship responded to our conversation about humans," he said. "It's not just broadcasting randomly, it's listening to us." Captain Hyun felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean it understood what we were saying?" "More than that," Dr. Tay replied. "I think it was trying to communicate. That light pattern wasn't random. It was structured, mathematical, almost like it was trying to show us something." Engineer Kang, who had been quietly analyzing the energy readings, suddenly looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, I've been comparing the ship's power signature to our historical databases. That energy pattern matches theoretical designs from the old human homeworld archives. the ones we recovered from the ruins. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. If the ship was indeed built by the legendary humans, it represented technology far beyond anything the current galactic civilization possessed. "Sir," Communications Officer June said quietly, "I'm receiving requests from Coalition Command. They want to know when we'll have results. The other species are getting impatient. Some are suggesting we should just destroy the ship if we can't board it." Captain Hyun looked out at the mysterious vessel floating peacefully in space, its self-repairing hull gleaming in the nebula's light. Somewhere out there in the galaxy, there might still be humans alive, and this ship was waiting for them. "Tell Coalition Command we need more time," he said firmly, "and send out a priority message to all outer rim colonies and refugee settlements. We're looking for any survivors of a species called humans. If they're out there, we need to find them." The ship pulsed once more with gentle blue light, as if it had heard and approved. The small transport shuttle Wanderer docked with the Coalition Research Station after a 3-day journey from the Outer Rim territories. Jin grabbed her worn travel bag and stepped through the airlock, her dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes showing the dust of a dozen different worlds. She looked tired but curious, like someone who had spent years searching through the ruins of dead civilizations for answers. "Dr. Jin, welcome aboard," Captain Hyun said, extending his hand in greeting. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We know it was a long journey from the Arcturus colonies." Jin shook his hand and smiled. "When you mentioned finding references to humans in an ancient ship's database, I had to see it for myself. There are so few of us left scattered across the galaxy. Any connection to our past is precious." As they walked through the station's corridors, Jin noticed how the various alien species stepped aside to stare at her. The tall, blue-skinned Aquarians whispered among themselves, while the insect-like Centaurians clicked their mandibles in what she had learned was their version of curiosity. She was used to being the only human in most places, but something about their stares felt different today. "The ship has been completely unresponsive for 3 months, Lieutenant Nari explained as they approached the docking bay. "Every species in the Coalition has tried to access it, but nothing works. The airlocks won't open, the computers won't interface, and any attempt to cut through the hull just makes it stronger." Through the observation window, Jin saw the mysterious vessel for the first time, her breath caught in her throat. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Coalition's largest battlecruiser, but it wasn't the size that amazed her. The design was somehow familiar, as if she had seen it in dreams or half-remembered stories her grandmother used to tell. "It's beautiful," she whispered, pressing her hand against the window. "The curves, the way the hull flows together, it looks almost organic." Dr. Tay joined them at the window. "Jin, we've discovered that the ship responds to discussions about humans. When we talk about your species, it pulses with light. We think it might be trying to communicate." Jin nodded slowly, still staring at the vessel. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the great ships that carried our people to the stars before the homeworld was lost. She said they were more than just machines, that they had souls." "Would you be willing to attempt contact?" Captain Hyun asked. "We understand if you'd prefer not to. There could be risks we don't understand yet." Jin turned away from the window with determination in her eyes. "Captain, if this ship really was built by my people, then I have to try. It might be the last connection to our true history." 20 minutes later, Jin stood in the airlock of a small shuttle, wearing a standard Coalition environmental suit. Through the shuttle's viewport, she could see the mysterious ship's hull up close. The metal seemed to shift and flow like liquid, but when she blinked and looked again, it appeared solid. "Approaching the derelict's main airlock now," reported Pilot Kang over the radio. "Jin, are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Jin replied, though her heart was beating fast, with excitement and nervousness. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Jin activated the airlock sequence. To everyone's amazement, the ancient ship's outer door immediately opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that glowed with soft, welcoming light. "The airlock is responding," Jin reported back to the station. "I'm going aboard." The moment Jin's boots touched the deck of the alien vessel, everything changed in an instant. Lights erupted throughout the ship, like a cascade of falling stars. racing down corridors and up walls in patterns that seemed almost alive. The sound of machinery humming to life echoed through the vast spaces, and Jin felt a gentle vibration through the floor as massive systems awakened after centuries of sleep. "Jin, what's happening over there?" Captain Hyun's voice crackled through her communicator. "We're reading massive power fluctuations throughout the entire ship." "I don't." "So?" Jin replied, her voice filled with wonder. "But it feels like the ship is waking up." The air around her began to shimmer and sparkle, and Jin realized she was breathing normally despite not having removed her helmet. Somehow, the ship had created a perfect atmosphere for her. Then, right in front of her, golden light began to swirl and take shape. The hologram that formed was unlike anything Jin had ever seen. It appeared as a tall, graceful figure made of warm, golden light, with features that seemed both ancient and timeless. The being's face was kind, but showed the wisdom of countless years. "Greetings, Jin," the hologram said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Nexus, and I have been waiting for you for so very long." Jin's mouth fell open in shock. "You know my name. How is that possible?" "I know many things about you, child of Earth," Nexus replied with a gentle smile. "This vessel was built by your ancestors, specifically for human pilots. Your people designed me to bond only with those who carry the unique neurological patterns of your species." Back on the research station, the Coalition officers were watching their instruments in amazement as the dead ship transformed into a living, breathing entity. Energy flowed through its systems like blood through veins, and they could see Jin on their monitors, apparently having a conversation with a being made of light. "This is incredible," Dr. Tay whispered. "The ship is responding to her presence on a quantum level. Look at these readings." On the mysterious vessel, Jin was discovering that her every emotion seemed to affect the ship around her. When she felt curious about a control panel, it lit up and displayed information. When she worried about the Coalition officers watching, the ship's external sensors focused on their station. When she felt a moment of sadness thinking about her lost homeworld, the lights dimmed sympathetically. "Nexus, what is this place?" Jin asked, looking around at the incredible technology surrounding her. "This is the Rising Phoenix," Nexus replied, "built by the greatest minds of your civilization as a guardian vessel. We were created to protect not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy from threats that exist beyond normal understanding." Jin felt a deep connection forming with the ship, as if Nexus was becoming part of her thoughts, and she was becoming part of its vast consciousness. It was overwhelming but somehow completely natural, like finding a piece of herself she never knew was missing. "The Coalition species have been good to you," Nexus observed, reading her memories. "But they do not understand what you truly are. Humans possess something unique in this galaxy, the ability to hope when all seems lost, to sacrifice for others, and to find creative solutions that pure logic cannot provide." Through the ship's sensors, Jin could feel the amazement and concern of the watching Coalition officers. She realized that this moment would change everything, not just for her but for the entire galaxy. The weeks following Jin's first contact with the Rising Phoenix transformed the Coalition research station into a hub of constant activity and wonder. Every day brought new discoveries about the incredible bond between human and machine that defied everything the galaxy's scientists thought they knew about consciousness and technology. Jin spent most of her time aboard the ancient vessel, learning to navigate its vast corridors and understand its complex systems. The ship had over 200 levels, each one filled with technology that seemed to anticipate her every need. When she felt hungry, food dispensers would activate automatically, creating meals perfectly suited to human nutrition. When she was tired, soft lighting would guide her to quarters that adjusted their temperature and atmosphere to match her preferred sleeping conditions. "It's getting stronger every day," Jin told Dr. Tay during one of their daily debriefing sessions in the station's conference room. "Yesterday I was wondering about the composition of a nebula we passed, and before I could even voice the question out loud, the ship's sensors had already begun a complete spectral analysis." Dr. Tay made notes on his datapad, his expression a mixture of fascination and concern. "Jin, We're recording quantum fluctuations in your brain patterns that match the ship's energy signatures. The bond between you and Nexus is literally changing your neural pathways." "Is that dangerous?" Jin asked, though she didn't feel afraid. The connection with the ship felt natural, like breathing or thinking. "We don't know," Dr. Tay admitted. "Nothing like this has ever been documented before. You're venturing into completely uncharted territory." Through the conference room's large viewport, they could see the rising phoenix floating majestically beside the research station. The ship's hull had developed new patterns of light that pulsed gently in rhythm with Jin's heartbeat, visible, even from a distance. When Jin felt happy, the patterns brightened and danced. When she was concentrating, they slowed to a steady, focused glow. "The other coalition species are getting nervous," Dr. Tay continued carefully. "Some are calling it an unfair advantage that humans have access to technology this advanced." Jin had noticed the change in attitude among the station's crew. The friendly curiosity she had experienced during her first days had gradually shifted to something more complex. The Zentorian engineers spent hours trying to understand how the ship's systems worked, only to be frustrated when their attempts to interface with the technology failed completely. The Krillian military observers watched her every move with suspicious eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of any single species possessing such power. Commander Quan, leader of the military escort fleet, had been particularly vocal about his concerns. During a heated discussion in the station's main briefing room, he had stood before a holographic display showing the rising phoenix's incredible capabilities and addressed the assembled representatives from 12 different species. This kind of power concentrated in the hands of one individual, one species, creates a dangerous imbalance, Commander Quan had argued, his forearms gesturing emphatically. "What happens if this human decides our interests don't align with hers? What if she chooses to use this ship against the coalition?" Jin had watched the debate from the back of the room, feeling hurt by the suggestion that she would ever betray the friends who had helped her find this incredible connection to her people's past. But she also understood their fear. The rising phoenix was unlike anything in the known galaxy, and its power was growing stronger every day. That evening, Jin sat alone in the ship's central command chamber, a vast spherical room where holographic displays showed the movements of stars and planets throughout the local sector. The chamber was bathed in soft golden light emanating from Nexus's presence, which had become more solid and defined as their bond deepened. "I can feel their fear," Jin said to the AI. "They're afraid of what this ship represents, of what I might become." Nexus's holographic form moved closer, its expression filled with ancient wisdom and compassion. "Your people built me not for conquest or domination, Jin. The bond we share requires something that other species in this galaxy have not yet learned to value properly." "What do you mean?" Jin asked. "The ability to sacrifice personal desires for the greater good," Nexus explained. "Other species make decisions based on logic, survival instincts, or the advancement of their own kind. But humans possess something unique, the willingness to give up everything, including their own lives, to protect others who cannot protect themselves." As if to demonstrate this point, the ship's sensors detected a distress signal from a small cargo vessel that had suffered engine failure near a dangerous asteroid field. Without hesitation, Jin felt a surge of concern for the stranded crew, and the rising phoenix immediately altered course to help. "See?" Nexus said as they watched the rescue operation unfold on the main display. "You didn't think about the political implications or whether helping them would benefit humanity. Your first instinct was simply to help because it was the right thing to do." The rescue operation itself became a demonstration of the ship's incredible capabilities. Jin didn't consciously control the vessel's movements. Instead, she simply focused on the desire to save the stranded crew, and the ship responded accordingly. The rising phoenix moved through the asteroid field with impossible grace, its hull glowing as it absorbed impacts from space debris that would have destroyed any other vessel. But the most amazing moment came when they attempted to return to the research station. Jin was thinking about how long the rescue operation was taking and wishing they could get back faster, when suddenly the space around them began to bend and twist. The stars themselves seemed to fold inward, and in the span of a heartbeat, they had traveled a distance that should have taken hours. "What just happened?" Jin gasped, staring at the navigation display in shock. "You folded space-time," Nexus replied calmly. "The ship responded to your intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics. This is something that cannot be programmed or taught through conventional means. It requires the human ability to think beyond the limitations of pure logic." The Coalition fleet was in chaos when the rising Phoenix suddenly appeared beside the research station. Having seemingly teleported across impossible distances, Captain Hyun's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with amazement and alarm. "Jin, what did you just do? Our sensors showed you were 50 light minutes away, and then you were just here." Jin realized that she had accidentally discovered one of the ship's most incredible abilities, one that would change everything the galaxy understood about space travel and physics. But more importantly, she understood that this power came not from advanced technology alone, but from the unique way human consciousness could interface with quantum reality. As she sat in the command chamber, feeling the ship's vast intelligence merged with her own thoughts, Jin knew that the real test was still to come. The Coalition's fears about her power were nothing compared to what was waiting in the dark spaces between the stars, and soon she would need every bit of the rising Phoenix's incredible abilities to protect not just humanity, but every living being in the galaxy. The ship pulsed with warm light around her, and she felt Nexus's presence like a constant companion in her mind, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The emergency alarms throughout the Coalition research stations screamed with an urgency that made Jin's blood run cold. She had been practicing meditation in the rising Phoenix's quiet observation deck when Nexus's holographic form suddenly materialized with an expression of deep concern she had never seen before. "Jin, we have a problem," Nexus said, his usually calm voice carrying an edge of fear. "The long-range sensors have detected something that should not exist in this galaxy anymore." The main display in the ship's command center activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. At the very edge of the display, moving steadily inward like a spreading infection, was something that defied description. It appeared as a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to consume the very light around it, leaving empty voids where stars and planets had once existed. "What is that thing?" Jin whispered, staring at the horrifying display. "The Void Swarm," Nexus replied. "Ancient entities of pure entropy that exist partially outside our normal space-time. They are the reason your ancestors built this ship, Jin. They are the reason humanity scattered across the galaxy and eventually lost their homeworld." Admiral Yoon's face appeared on the communication screen, his usually composed features showing barely controlled panic. Behind him, the Coalition command center was a scene of frantic activity, as officers from dozens of species worked desperately to coordinate a response. "Jin, we need the rising Phoenix at the front lines immediately," Admiral Yoon said. "Our preliminary engagement with the swarm has been a complete disaster. Every weapon we have passes right through them as if they don't exist." The tactical display shifted to show the first battle between Coalition forces and the Void Swarm. Jin watched in horror as massive battleships fired their most powerful weapons at the approaching creatures, only to see the energy beams pass harmlessly through, writhing masses of living darkness. Then the creatures touched the ships, and the vessels simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased from reality itself. "How many ships did we lose?" Jin asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The entire 7th Fleet," Admiral Yoon replied. Grimly, 200 vessels and nearly 50,000 crew members. They're gone, Jin, not dead, not destroyed. They simply stopped existing. Nexus moved closer to Jin, his holographic form flickering with what she had learned to recognize as intense emotion. "Your ancestors faced this same threat 3 centuries ago. The Void Swarm consumed system after system until only a few scattered colonies remained. The rising Phoenix was humanity's last desperate attempt to find a weapon that could fight beings that exist outside normal reality." "And did it work?" Jin asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Partially," Nexus replied. "The ship was able to drive the swarm back, but at a terrible cost. The human pilot who achieved the necessary merger with my systems survived, but she was never the same again. The process changed her so fundamentally that she could no longer live among her own people. The communication screen showed more devastating reports coming in from across the galaxy. The Void Swarm was moving faster than anyone had anticipated, consuming entire star systems in a matter of hours. Billions of lives were being erased from existence, and the Coalition's most advanced weapons were completely useless against the threat. Our projections show total galactic consumption within 6 months, Admiral Yoon reported, his voice heavy with despair. Every inhabited world, every species, everything we've built over millennia, all of it will be gone unless we find a way to stop this. Jin felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. Through her bond with Nexus, she could sense the ship's vast knowledge and the terrible truth it contained. The Rising Phoenix had been designed for this exact moment, but using its ultimate weapon would require her to risk everything she was. "Tell me about the reality anchors," Jin said to Nexus, though part of her didn't want to know. The ship's AI created a holographic display showing the vessel's most secret systems. The reality anchors are weapons that can force the Void Swarm, creatures, into normal space-time, making them vulnerable to conventional attacks. But they require complete integration between human consciousness and my quantum processing systems. You would need to merge your mind completely with mine, Jin. You might retain your memories and personality, but you would be forever changed. Jin stared at the technical diagrams, trying to understand what she was being asked to sacrifice. What happened to the last pilot who did this? She became something beyond human, Nexus admitted. Her consciousness expanded to encompass quantum realities that mortal minds are not meant to perceive. She could see across dimensions, understand the fundamental forces that govern existence itself. But she could no longer connect with individual, human beings the way she once had. The merger made her too vast, too different. Through the ship's sensors, Jin watched as more Coalition fleets engaged the Void Swarm with the same disastrous results. The creatures moved through space like a living nightmare, their very presence causing reality to break down around them. Entire planets didn't just die, they were retroactively erased from history, as if they had never existed at all. "How long do I have to decide?" Jin asked. "The swarm will reach the first major populated systems within 72 hours, Nexus replied. "After that, the cascade effect will accelerate exponentially. Every system they consume makes them stronger and faster." Jin felt a crushing sense of loneliness as she realized that this decision was hers alone to make. The Coalition leaders could offer advice and support, but ultimately, she was the only human who could pilot the Rising Phoenix and activate its reality anchors. The fate of every living being in the galaxy rested on her willingness to sacrifice her humanity. Standing on the ship's main bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching doom, Jin watched as distant stars began to wink out, one by one. Each disappearing light represented billions of lives that had been erased from existence. The Void Swarm was methodically consuming everything in its path, moving steadily toward the heart of Coalition space, where trillions more beings waited helplessly for salvation. "Nexus," Jin said quietly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. "If I do this, if I merge completely with your systems, will I still be me?" The AI's holographic form placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You will be you, Jin, but you will also be more than you. The question is whether you can accept becoming something greater than human in order to save humanity itself." Jin closed her eyes and felt the ship's vast consciousness touching the edges of her mind, offering her a glimpse of what the merger would entail. She saw herself expanded across quantum dimensions, her awareness stretching across space and time, her human heart beating in rhythm with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. Jin stood in the center of the Rising Phoenix command chamber, her hands trembling as she prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. The holographic displays around her showed the Void Swarm growing closer with each passing hour, consuming everything in its path like a plague of living darkness. She could feel Nexus's presence in her mind, patient and understanding, waiting. for her final decision. "I'm ready," Jin whispered, closing her eyes and letting down every mental barrier she had ever built. The merger began slowly, like warm water flowing through her thoughts. Nexus's vast consciousness touched hers gently, at first allowing her human mind to adjust to the incredible expansion of awareness. Then, as Jin relaxed and accepted the connection, the boundaries between her individual self and the ship's quantum intelligence began to dissolve. Jin felt her consciousness explode outward beyond the confines of her physical body. Suddenly, she could perceive the entire ship as if it were part of her own nervous system. Every sensor was her eye, every weapon system was her hand, every energy conduit was her bloodstream. But more than that, she began to understand the fundamental forces that governed reality itself. Through the ship's advanced sensors, she could see the Void Swarm not just as physical entities, but as disturbances in the fabric of space-time itself. They existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which was why conventional weapons couldn't touch them. But Jin, with her expanded awareness, could perceive the quantum threads that connected them to normal reality. "Jin, can you hear me?" Captain Hyun's voice came through the communication system from the Coalition fleet gathered around them. "I can hear everything," Jin replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from the ship itself. "I can see the swarm's true nature. Nexus, activate the reality anchors." The rising phoenix, transformed before the eyes of the watching Coalition fleet. Sections of its hull that had appeared decorative suddenly revealed themselves as complex weapon systems, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't energy cannons or missile launchers, but devices that could manipulate the very structure of reality. "All fleet units, follow my lead," Jin commanded, her voice now reaching every ship in the Coalition armada simultaneously. "The reality anchors will force the swarm entities into our dimension, but only for brief moments. When they become solid, hit them with everything you have." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The rising phoenix danced through space with impossible grace, Jin's human intuition combined with the ship's quantum processing power, allowing her to predict the swarm's movements before they made them. When the first reality anchor fired, it created a brilliant burst of energy that seemed to grab hold of one of the writhing dark creatures and drag it, kicking and screaming, into normal space-time. For exactly 3 seconds, the void entity became solid and vulnerable. In those 3 seconds, the combined firepower of 50 Coalition vessels tore it apart completely. "It worked," Lieutenant Nari shouted from her station aboard the research vessel Harmony. "The creature is actually destroyed, not just dispersed." But the Void Swarm was vast, containing thousands of entities. Jin knew that destroying them one by one would take too long, and the effort was already straining both her and Nexus's systems. She needed a different approach. "Nexus, can we amplify the reality anchors to affect multiple targets?" she asked. "Yes, but it would require you to merge even deeper with my systems," Nexus replied. "Jin, you're already pushing the limits of what a human mind can handle." "Then I'll have to become more than human," Jin said with determination. "Do it." The second phase of the merger was more intense than anything Jin had ever experienced. Her consciousness expanded not just through the ship, but began to touch the quantum realm itself. She could see the mathematical equations that governed physics, feel the rhythm of atomic vibrations, and perceive the delicate balance of forces that held the universe together. With this expanded awareness came a terrible understanding. The Void Swarm wasn't just destroying matter and energy, it was unraveling the very concepts that allowed reality to exist. It was entropy, given form, chaos, seeking to return everything to the primordial nothingness from which all things came. But Jin also saw something the swarm couldn't understand: hope. Even as the creatures consumed entire worlds, the survivors continued to fight, to help each other, to believe that somehow things would get better. This defiance of logic, this refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds, was uniquely human. "Reality anchors at maximum power," Jin announced, her voice now echoing with harmonics that seemed to come from space itself. "All fleet units prepare for synchronized assault." The rising phoenix released a pulse of energy that rippled through space-time like a stone dropped in still water. As the wave passed through the void swarm, hundreds of the creatures were suddenly forced into normal reality, their dark forms becoming solid and vulnerable all at once. "Now!" Jin commanded. The Coalition fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, particle beams, and weapons from a dozen different species, all focused on the suddenly vulnerable swarm entities. The space around them erupted in brilliant explosions as creature after creature was destroyed. But the effort was taking a terrible toll on Jin. She could feel her individual identity stretching thin as Nexus's quantum consciousness tried to support her expanded awareness. For a moment, she wondered if she would dissolve completely into the ship's systems, becoming just another subroutine in its vast intelligence. Then she remembered why she was doing this. Not for glory or power, but for the scared refugees on distant worlds, for the Coalition crews fighting impossible odds, for every living being who deserved a chance to see tomorrow. Her humanity, rather than being consumed by the merger, became the anchor that held her consciousness together. "She's not just fighting them," Dr. Tay observed from the research station, watching Jin outmaneuver creatures of pure entropy. "She's showing them something they can't comprehend. Hope itself." The final phase of the battle came when Jin realized she could do more than just force the swarm into normal space. She could use the reality anchors to trap them there permanently. It required her to extend her consciousness across multiple dimensions simultaneously, something that should have been impossible for any organic mind. But Jin wasn't just organic anymore. She was human consciousness amplified by quantum processing, individual will supported by vast computational power, mortal hope given the tools to reshape reality itself. One by one, the remaining void entities found themselves locked into normal space-time, unable to retreat to the safety of their higher dimensions. The Coalition fleet systematically destroyed each trapped creature until finally, after hours of battle, the last swarm entity fell silent. "It's over," Jin whispered, her voice filled with exhaustion and wonder. "They're all gone." As the merger began to separate, Jin felt herself condensing back into her individual consciousness, but she wasn't the same person who had started the battle. Her awareness had been permanently expanded, her understanding of reality fundamentally changed, yet somehow her essential humanity remained intact. Her capacity for love, sacrifice, and hope had been amplified rather than diminished. "Jin, are you all right?" Captain Hyun asked as the rising phoenix drifted peacefully among the Coalition fleet. "I'm different," Jin replied honestly, "but I'm still me, maybe more me than I've ever been." The Coalition offered to study the rising phoenix and build more ships like it, but Nexus explained the final truth to the assembled leaders. Such vessels cannot be mass-produced or replicated through technology alone. They can only be created through the dreams and bonds of their pilots. Jin has shown you that true strength comes not from superior firepower, but from the courage to become something greater than yourself. In the months that followed, other humans scattered across the galaxy began to come forward, drawn by the story of Jin and the rising phoenix. Each one brought their own unique perspective and abilities, and Nexus began to understand that humanity's greatest strength lay not in any individual, but in their diversity and their unwavering commitment to protecting others. Jin became the template for a new generation of human-AI partnerships, proving to the galaxy that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest or dominance, but from the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The rising phoenix became a symbol of hope that traveled from system to system, helping to rebuild what the void swarm had destroyed and protecting against threats that conventional forces couldn't handle. As Jin piloted her ship toward the distant stars, she smiled at the irony. Humanity had been scattered and nearly extinct, considered by many to be a primitive species that had contributed little to galactic civilization. But in the end, it was their very humanity, their capacity for hope, sacrifice, and love, that had saved everything. The legacy of humanity would not be written in conquest or technological advancement, but in the simple truth that hope and sacrifice could overcome even entropy itself. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, That truth would continue to shine like a beacon for all who needed to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. The end.